So I wanted to make a video on this spaceship thing that we see in the Xenoblade Genesis trailer. So we can see here, there is this mountainous kind of structure. Now, many people online have been right to point out that this is very obviously an inorganic thing. There's very clear lines in it that are very going across. We have these huge arches that are very clear. It's got a very pointed tip to it, and there's these little wings that definitely look like it could be a spaceship. Specifically, the one we see in Xenogears. That would be this ship here. Hello, Reddit. A lot of people have likened this to this, and I would say that's pretty similar. They're very similar. I don't know if it's exactly the same thing, but just that design, this is something they've used before. And this looks like it could definitely be of a similar origin, or they're trying to capture the same kind of vibe with it. They're definitely trying to make a spaceship. But what I don't see people talking about is kind of the area around it. Now, something to note here that I think is really important is the distinction between playable area and non-playable area. I think this pretty clearly shows the difference between the two. So actually, we'll let it go forward a little bit more here. Okay, so I'll pause here. Actually, this is a great spot to pause. I think that all of this stuff, you can watch me with my cursor here. All of this stuff here, I don't think this is a playable area. None of this is playable. None of this crater is playable. All of this over here, not playable. However, this stuff with these very smooth kind of textures to it and these kind of more drab colors, I believe that all of this is a playable area. I believe all of it is. And that includes over here, where you see there's this big cliff and this ridge that we can kind of walk along. And I imagine that probably curves, maybe somewhere down here in the corner, it curves back and goes up to this cathedral. And I think that's a really important distinction because it kind of tells us where we'll be going. It looks like this thing, I mean, we can kind of imagine a person here. It'd be a really, really tiny person compared to this is massive. It's huge. And that's very normal for a Xeno game to have unfathomably large, spacecraft. However, I think it's important to look at the geography behind the cathedral, which is not something I think people talk about. I think the game will definitely have us going up to the cathedral, and I think we're gonna go in this spaceship, which that's the most Xeno thing ever. It's literally like Xenoblade 2 walking into the World Tree again, but just this time it's kind of different. But what I'm talking about here is that we can see the similarities between these areas here, which I believe to be playable areas, because of the way they're rendered, and it's also the only places with trees. And I imagine they want their trees to be a big focal point because it's pretty. It's nice to have greenery. But if you notice, this texture here, what I presume to be a playable area, looks very similar to these textures up here outside of this ship thing. Now, we can assume that these are two very similar types of terrain. I'm going to bet that this is playable area, and that leads me to believe that we will be going inside of this thing right here where my cursor is. Right over there in the corner, right here. I think this is pretty squarely an entrance that kind of comes out, and then you can go around and back down, and maybe it pops out somewhere over here behind the cathedral. That, to me, seems like the most obvious thing that's happening here. If I go back to this big opening shot, we'll start with this. Something else that's really interesting to note about this spaceship, there has been some debate. Did the spaceship crash onto the planet, or did it break through the planet? Now, we know that the shape of a planet is kind of a hollow sphere. We know that there is some kind of a star in the center with 5 other little star things that probably aren't actually stars. So my opinion is that this thing is probably very similar to the ship that we saw from Xenogears in that last picture I just showed you. And I'm willing to bet that this crashed through the sphere. And I'm going to go ahead and make a terrible drawing of what I mean. Okay, so we've got a little thing, right? We've got a little thing in Krita, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a circle, right? Okay, we've got a circle. This, imagine, my friends, imagine that this is the world of Xenoblade Genesis. We've got, I can't draw. There's our little sun, and you know what? Just for fun, we'll put the 5 little ones. There's the 5 little ones around it. My opinion is that this whole thing exists within, get this, outer space. And we're in outer space, okay? So here's what I think really happened here, folks, okay? I think we take this little guy, right? We're gonna copy him, we're gonna paste him, and then we're gonna grab this guy, we're gonna move it, okay? So we've got another little guy here, right? Okay? So in my opinion, I think we have something like this. We'll call it here. Here's our spaceship, okay? And this is what I think happened, okay? This is really good. We're going to take it, and I think it just went like this. That's what I think happened. I think there was a spaceship that just crashed straight into this thing, and then now it's probably just hanging out in the middle of space, doing whatever it's doing. Anyway, that being said, I do think that this is probably where the big sci-fi twist comes in. I don't know if it's going to be at all related to Xenosaga or the Xenoblade games or even Xenogears, but I do think that this is where the big sci-fi twist is coming. I think that there is some reason, there's obviously a cathedral here built for some reason. This is a place of high significance for the people of this world. But the question is, why? Well, if I had to guess, this is probably where the Crystones come from. That's my guess. My guess is that the people of this world found the Crystones in this ship, or they were born of some technology that comes from this spaceship. Either something outside of the spaceship, or somebody went into the spaceship and found the technology and came out with it. That is my personal belief. I could be wrong, but I do think that this has something to do with the big sci-fi twist. It could be the case that this has been here and no one's been able to get inside. Perhaps the material, maybe the metal is too thick, no one can break through it because they're using very primitive tools as compared to other Xeno game standards. But I'm wondering if through the plot, our main character finds some sort of tool, some sort of thing that allows them to open a door and get inside of this ship, which could be right around here. It could be this little area here. That's my guess, my hypothesis. And the reason for this hypothesis is that much like Xenoblade 2, and I am drawing from past games here, much like Xenoblade 2, the technology of this world comes from sort of a sci-fi origin, right? The blades, while very fantasy and everything about them, the world of Xenoblade 2 is very fantasy. But then once you reach the world tree and you reach Elysium, you find out that all of this is super cool sci-fi technology that was made by Klaus, which is really neat. And I have a feeling here that this game is going to have a very similar twist where the Crystones that pull on the anima or pull from the anima in this world all originate from some kind of technology that is here. Now this also could be the case that this is not true. This could be way off. I could be way off, but that's my working theory. That's where I think this is going. Now, there is this line here toward the end of the trailer here about a fallen god, and that is a really interesting line. And I have even in my past videos thought that maybe this was referring to one of the characters of the previous Xeno games. It could be Klaus, it could be Zanza, it could be Malos, it could be whatever. I don't think this is the case. I think this is a completely new person or entity that we have never seen before. I think it's completely unrelated. And I think that's probably a good thing. Would it be cool if it was somehow like Malos, like it was the Logos core processor doing something neat? Maybe that would be cool. However, if they want to be true to their mission in saying that this is a Xeno game where you don't need to play the previous ones and they want to have sort of a sort of new fresh start to it, then they should not make it a previous character or something that we already know. In fact, if they wanted to do something really cool, they could still tie it back to Xenoblade and Xenosaga by introducing another wavelength entity. And if you don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, I'm sorry, but basically in Xenosaga, which is the set of games that preceded Xenoblade, and they are connected, it's arguable that Xenosaga takes place in the same universe as Xenoblade. That's arguable. It could also be an alternate universe. It could be the same. It doesn't really matter. It's not that important. In Xenosaga, one of the driving antagonistic forces of the game is a being known as Udu, which Udu is a god, and Udu, well, I guess you could call him a god, but he lives in a different dimension than the dimension that Xenosaga takes place in. Completely different universe, basically. A higher dimension. He's above the lower domain, the upper domain. If you know your Xenosaga, you know what I'm talking about. But if you don't, basically it's like God. And what I'm wondering is Xenoblade Genesis going to have its sort of new equivalent? Is it going to have something like Udu, that is a god that watches over humanity and is curious about humanity? Is this going to be something similar to that? Now, what's interesting here is this is a fallen god, which it's pretty neat. It's, you know, pretty interesting. But I don't know. That's what I think. I think that this spaceship could have a lot of importance to the plot. And I think it's just the kind of thing to throw into your trailer at 2/3 of the way in. I think it's like the perfect thing to throw in because this is so incredible. What an incredible thing to put in your game. Now, one thing I do want to talk about I think I made a mention before, is how people seem to think this is coming through the planet, like I just showed in my drawing. And the evidence to this is that obviously, one, the place is hollow, so it had to have come from somewhere outside, and two, is actually the way this crater is formed. I think in a normal crater, you would expect to see sort of a flat ground, maybe a tiny hump, then the hole, maybe another tiny hump across the diameter of it, and then, you know, pretty flat, right? Or whatever the terrain's doing. When you have something sticking up and through terrain like this, it's very possible that as this moves up, it would push aside rocks and dirt and everything to kind of push it up and through. And then once it's already through, the remaining rocks and dirt would then fall into the hole that this has created, which is exactly what is happening here. You can see that as this thing pushed through this sphere or whatever it is, it pushed up the land all around. You can see this is a pretty substantial mountain going up around it. And then the remainder of that dirt after this pushed through fell in and created this sort of crater. That is super interesting. That's really neat. I think it's very possible we're going to see a world that has just a beautiful large space sphere with a spaceship sticking out of it, and that's pretty cool. Anyway, that's my thoughts about the Xenoblade Genesis spaceship debacle. I'm curious to hear what you guys think. Anyway, love you. Bye.